are here for our second to last session of the day. On day 2, we are closing the day out with Dr. Heidi Harris, and we are just so excited to have her here with us today. I want to take a moment and just give you some background into Heidi's experiences so that you can really understand the foundation for this presentation. So Heidi Harris has her PhD in early childhood education from Walden University, and she is an associate faculty member in the graduate level program at UAGC, as well as Spring Arbor University. She consults with Early Experience Learning, a curriculum developer for early childhood programs, to craft professional development and curriculum for them. Heidi's passions and research expertise lie in the constructivist-based pedagogy of Reggio Emilia. She enjoys homeschooling her 3 children, implementing an eclectic approach that combines tenets of the Reggio Emilia philosophy, nature-based learning, integrating their faith, and emergent practices into meaningful learning opportunities for her kiddos. And we're so happy to have her here to share some of those practices today and some outdoor experience in early childhood programs. Heidi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's so great to be here with all of you. So yeah, I'm going to jump into my presentation and share outdoor experiences in early childhood. So just to define sort of what I'm going to be focusing on today, I will use the term outdoor experiences, nature-based learning, outdoor education, and outdoor learning, all those terms sort of interchangeably. And just the whole idea behind it is just that we really want to give children the opportunity to explore and connect with nature and outdoors. And so throughout my presentation, these are sort of the learning outcomes that I hope that you can walk away from. I want to make this as practical as possible. So we are going to go through a little bit of starting with theory and why this is so beneficial to children. We're also going to talk about barriers and then talk about some solutions, as well as, end with some large scale ideas of how you could create like your own outdoor classroom, as well as just some simple ideas for implementation if that's maybe not available to you. I also want to mention that all of the images throughout my presentation are of my own children, just for confidentiality purposes. I didn't use any from my time in the classroom. So you heard a little bit about my story. I'm a professor here as well as Spring Arbor, and I've been in the field for about 18 years. I wanted to, this topic of outdoor experiences is just really on my heart, and I think back about like why is this so important to me, and I reflect back to the reason why is my childhood. I was raised on a 80-acre farm in the American Midwest in Michigan, and I just have so many wonderful memories of connecting to nature. We had literally 2 channels on the TV, and we were really forced to be outside for the majority of our days. And I also conducted in my master's program, I conducted a project where I developed an outdoor classroom in Northern California at a program I was working at. And I learned just through that research and my literature review so much about, nature-based programs and the benefits of those for children, and just different strategies that I want to use. And then also in my doctoral dissertation, I studied the Reggio Emilia pedagogy, which is a philosophy that's originated from Reggio Emilia, Italy, and many programs I'm sure many of you are familiar with have adapted some of the ideas here in the United States and all throughout the world. But what I see as a connecting piece between that philosophy and the outdoor classroom is that the both of those things are finding joy in learning. And when I'm outside with children, I just feel so much joy. And that's what we want our children to walk away with and our students to walk away with. I also homeschool using an eclectic approach and nature-based learning. And this is a picture of my three children, and we really like to discover and explore outside. And this is just a photo of a reservoir near our house that we like to go to often and start our mornings off that way. So I want to stop and just think for a moment, for you to think about maybe one of your earliest memories of spending time in nature. So think back. I know it might take a minute for you to think back on that. How did that make you feel? Were there any smells that you remember being associated with it? Any elements of touch or sounds? What about taste? So some of you can think back on a memory that really resonates with you from your early years, and you can really remember a lot of those senses being activated through that experience in nature. I know for me, this photo is of my family farm, and one of my earliest memories is baling hay with my dad and my uncle, and um, feeling the alfalfa scratch my legs and smelling that smell and the sweet summertime of July. And what I know about that experience, and what maybe many of you can relate to, is that you were actively involved in that process. And we want that for our children. We want to create experiences for children, especially in the younger years, where they are active participants in their learning. We know that the constructivist based learning model tells us, from Bruner and Vygotsky and Piaget, that children learn through doing. And so many experiences and being outdoors and being in nature fulfill that. So we want to think like, why are we doing this, right? Let's think about the potential benefits. First of all, we know, if I want you to think of maybe some memories of children that you've worked with, maybe your own children or children in a center that you've worked with. And when they have had freedom to freely explore outdoor spaces, I'm sure that you have noticed some of these benefits. So the first is the exposure to outdoors supports creativity and problem solving. Just this week, my children were creating mud soup, and they were, just really working together to figure out what they were going to do and what they were going to add. And Mom, we need this, and we need to get the measuring cup and see how much water we need. And so we know that there's so many opportunities for children to be creative. Also, it helps develop critical thinking. We want children that are inquisitive, that are curious. I just watched a talk, maybe some of you are familiar with Dr. Dan Siegel. He has created the Yes Brain approach with Dr. Tina Pearson, I believe. And they talk about, he specifically talks about when companies are hiring in the Silicon Valley, they are looking for workers that are innovative, that are creative, that have new ideas to bring to these startup companies. And we want to foster that in our young children. We want them to be thinkers outside of the box, and fostering these opportunities outside helps children to develop those skills. We also know that it supports multiple developmental domains that are listed here. It can really help to reduce stress, and it's helpful to the brain. I mean, I know that, if you think about your experiences of being outside, one of my students just shared, one of my adult students from here just shared that one of the things that they do when they are feeling overwhelmed with their workload is they go down to the ocean and they sit by the water and they watch the waves, and it just immediately brings calm to their bodies. And that's what we want to give to our children. It also helps them to, when they connect to the earth, when they have experiences with the environment, they're going to want to care for the environment. And we know more than ever that we need to take care of our earth. We need to be conscious and be able to do that and develop stewardship for that. And honestly, one of the main reasons why, I've just been so aware of this pervasiveness of technology on our children, and we've heard some wonderful speakers over the last couple of days that talk about so many great things of technology, and we know there's so many wonderful benefits of it. But we also know that we really have to take into consideration how much is too much, and be conscious of digital citizenship, which means we need to help children cultivate an awareness of how much is too much, and when our brains need a break from it. And we need to make sure we're not replacing the opportunity to be outside with technology. I always like to share the Fred Rogers and Nacy technology statement, which is one that's really evidence-based and helps us to always remember how to be conscious of using technology. So to speak a little bit more on the benefits, we want to look at this statistic. I think is really powerful. So from the Children in Nature Network, if you don't already know of this organization, please, go check them out. They're so wonderful. This is their mission statement right here. Over the past few generations, childhood has moved indoors. On average, today's kids spend up to 44 hours per week in front of a screen and less than 10 minutes a day playing outdoors. And for too many kids, regular and safe access to nature is determined by race, income, identity, ability, and postal code. I want to make a change in that. I don't want to sit back and just be okay with this. We need to advocate that there's equitable access for all children, and that we are making a difference in not replacing screen time for access to nature. So I think this quote is just one of my favorites. It's just a really powerful quote that just helps to remind us as educators that we really want to make sure that we are not always, putting ourselves in a box in the classroom. We all know that learning extends everywhere. It extends throughout, the classroom door. But it's always a good reminder to remember that, and to remember that taking some of your materials that you would typically do inside, taking them on outside, extending the classroom. I think just in this image here, you can see so many different impetuses for learning, and thinking about how we can do that. When you're outside in the playground and you're observing the children, take time to scaffold their learning and think about what they're doing and ask them questions. So when children play in natural spaces, they're far more likely to invent their own games and in more structured settings, a key factor in becoming self-directed and inventive as children and later in life. Now, if you're not aware of Richard Louv, make sure you write his name down. He has written multiple books. His most popular is Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. And he really speaks to advocating for connecting children, families, and communities to nature. And we want children to be self-directed and be inventive. And they can do this when we offer more freedom and access to outside. So thinking about, how we as human beings are wired. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Howard Gardner and his theory on multiple intelligences, but we really want to take time to reflect on how we are wired as human beings, and then be able to also honor the children that are in our classroom. Um, Specifically, as I speak on the topic of outdoor experiences, we want to really make sure that we are honoring the children that are naturalists. That means children that are a natural, connected to the earth and to the environment. They're curious, they have questions, they want to know about animals and plants. And um, how are you helping support those children in the classroom? Also, bodily kinesthetic learners. Throughout the sessions that I've heard so far, many of the presenters have talked on this need for children to have movement. So how can we do that? Well, a lot of children that are wired in this way need to go outside. A lot of the reason why I chose to homeschool in the first place is that my child, my firstborn, is a bodily kinesthetic learner. He is amazingly skilled at all sports. And he started snowboarding when he was 2 years old. He could just, after he started walking, my husband got him on a snowboard, and his strength is that. But, it doesn't always transfer into the classroom as a strength. And so as mindful educators, we need to make sure that we are looking for opportunities to be able to honor all of our children that are in our classroom, and specifically the ones that need more time outside. So as I read these quotes from Anita Olds, she is an author that's written in the book. She has quotes from inside the book, The Great Outdoors: Restoring Children's Right to Play Outside, which I do link to all the resources that I talk about in my last slide. But I'm gonna read these quotes, and I just want you to have a moment and think and reflect on your own practice and your own approach to education in your own classrooms and schools. If very active children were permitted more time in a safe, interesting outdoor setting, would their behavior during indoor time be more tolerable to adults? Indeed, it is likely that restrictions placed on learning environments that limit opportunities for movement and active engagement contribute substantially to, if not actually cause, many so-called behavioral and learning difficulties. So many times we identify children as a certain way, maybe ADHD or, this or that, which definitely there are ways that we do that in a reasoned manner, but we need to make sure that we're not over diagnosing, and we're looking at how are we instructing? Is it developmentally appropriate? Are we following what we know about child development theory? Another thing that's really important that I heard other speakers talk about is, we know that children are experiencing trauma more than ever before. The adverse childhood experiences, research that was done by Kaiser Permanente, the ACEs study for short, that was brought to our attention more by Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, tells us that we need to be thinking about trauma and responding to it in our classroom. And one of the ways that we can do that is by providing more time in nature. And this is also from the Children in Nature Network. But really, it just speaks to how we can use interventions that are nature based to support healing and to support children who have experienced these traumas and their families. So as I move forward, I just want to make sure that I control for implicit bias. It's always important as educators to think about, okay, my experiences are not the same as my neighbors and as my coworkers and as my students in my class. All of us have different experiences that lead us to thinking in a certain way. So always controlling for that. I know that not everyone grew up privileged to be live in the American Midwest in a farming community. I see that and I acknowledge that. So when you're working with others, we need to really be mindful that we take into consideration our community context, and that means specifically who is in our classroom, what are the ages and the stages and the development of each child, what are our coworkers, what is their background, what's their culture, what's their experience. Also looking at the greater community at large. Is there space? Is it an urban setting or is it a rural setting? Like, what is the geographic location? Is it safe for us to be going outside? All of these things are really important to consider as we develop outdoor experiences. This photo is of me overlooking one of the cliffs when I lived in Northern California in Santa Cruz. Now that community culture is very different from the rural setting that I live in currently in Michigan. So taking that in consideration. I also want to make sure that you remember that creating a full-on outdoor classroom or, really moving along with this idea and this concept of nature-based programs can take a lot of time. My husband and I, or our family, we just bought a house in we've had it, I guess, for almost a year now. And it is a very old house. It's over 100 years old. Every single room needs to be completely done and renovated. And my husband's a carpenter, and we don't really have the financial resources to outsource. So we are doing everything by hand. I have to remind him it takes time. Value is in the process, right? We don't see change overnight, but it's going to come just little steps along the way. And then always making sure that we're connecting to standards in assessment. I always go to developmentally appropriate practices, making sure that we're connecting to those, as well as the code of ethical conduct from NACI, and then whatever your, guiding philosophy is in your classroom, or any state or local or federal standards that you're going with. Okay, so we always need to start with, okay, you may be saying, well, this looks great, this is wonderful, but for where I am, this isn't going to work. So let's talk about some barriers, and then we're going to go to some solutions. What if we don't have access to the outdoors? What if we don't have storage? Financially, we don't have resources. There's no workforce to help. How do I keep all the children safe with just giving them the freedom to explore? And what if I can't gain like buy-in from my coworkers or administration? So we're going to talk about that. So, we know we want to identify barriers, but then we want to move forward with a growth mindset with solutions at hand. Okay. So, access. If you don't have access to going outside, or you have limited access, bring elements of nature inside. One of the presenters today, or there was two of them, that showed some beautiful images of programs. And what I noticed most about those images was the plants that they had available. So inviting children to care for living things, pets, living plants, it can really change the environment and create such a calming space. And it's also, when we think of nature, it doesn't always have to be outside. We can bring elements inside the classroom and give children experiences that way as well. So public transportation is a great way to be able to go to places. Place-based education. I'm sure many of you have heard of that before, and that's basically just exploring and learning in the community that you live in. So doing research, finding maybe some trails that you could take public transportation to, or parks, those are all free. But just, if you're worried about access, or there's not access, thinking about how you could use that if you didn't have, busing through the program that you work in. Storage. I mean, that's something that we do really need to think about, especially with weather conditions. Right now it's raining outside here, and you might be able to hear the rain, but it's always important to have some type of storage that's going to keep your materials from, wear and tear. So plastic bins, sheds, shade covers, all those things are important to think about. And then you may be thinking, okay, how do I get the money for that, right? Those things cost, especially the sheds and the shade covers. There are some grants that you can look into, and I do have a link on my resources page at the very end that you could look at. There's some that are like statewide grants, as well as federal grants. Thrift stores and donation centers are a wonderful way to be able to um, get materials that you need in a very low cost way. Garage sales are my favorite. Most of these materials that you see in the pictures here are garage sale finds, like little bread pans, little things. I cut up something that we had in the garden, and then offered it to the children, with little sticks and leaves, and all of those things. You can think about finding outside in nature, or maybe thrifting. Family work days are also great. Say that you want to build a shed, get buy-in from the families, have a work day. Some families are really looking for those opportunities. Do it on a Saturday morning for a couple of hours. They want to connect with other families. They want to get to know other families, especially in light of COVID. As we're coming back together, many families have desperately needed that, and they're wanting that, and they're looking to that. So have a vision for what that family work day is going to accomplish. And maybe you have some parents who are willing and able to create something like a shed, or something that you really need. So safety wise, creating agreements. We are sometimes apt to say, well, no, we're not going to do that. And I'm going to talk a little bit further on that in a minute. But when we create agreements, basically those are just expectations for the children that they agree on. We set them up for success. So talking about, okay, so we are going to, go outside for small group today. let's talk about the expectations. Before you go out, you're going to set the ground rules and talk about, okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go outside and we're going to sit down on the blanket together. We're going to read our books. And then for the last 10 minutes, you're going to have an opportunity to run around in the grass. Or you're going to be able to go on the playground for the last 10 minutes. So they know the expectation ahead of time. Buy-in. So this is really important for, collaborating with the rest of the community of the educators and the staff. One way you could do that is creating an outdoor learning committee. One of the programs that I worked at, I was on the outdoor learning committee. It was just spearheaded by some educators that really wanted to make changes, but wanted to collaborate and work together on how to go about doing that. Also, book clubs are great. Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv that I just spoke of. I would definitely recommend. That would be like a starting book that I would recommend. It really can gain a lot of inspiration and give a lot of information and reasons why we want to do this. And it can get other educators on board and understanding why this is important. Also, school visits with other like forest-based programs or other programs that are maybe a little further ahead of you that you can look to for inspiration. So one of the things that could be a barrier is the way we think about giving children opportunities to express themselves outside. So one of the first professors that I had in undergrad said to me and said to the whole class, before you say no to children, ask yourself why. So we really get into the habit of it's easy to say no. No, we're not going to use sticks. No, we're not going to pick that up. No, we're not going to jump in the puddle. But why is that? Typically, it's because some of it can be safety concerns, which we're going to talk about, but some of it can be the inconvenience. We really don't want the child wet because we don't want to have to deal with changing them, which is very real and something that we should consider. But also, if it's that important to you, if we can make 5 more minutes in the rhythm of our day, that gives opportunities for children to change. And we're teaching them self-help skills. We're also, typically children should have extra clothes at school anyway. That's another great way to involve families. Ask for donations if your families, I know for me, we get so many things donated to us that I'm always looking for ways to donate clothes and boots and all those things to others. So those are ways that you can go around it, and just making sure that we're having an open mind to some of these ideas, because it might take you a little bit of time to shift your thinking. So this research study was done in Wisconsin, and they developed a nature-based program for 4-year-old for 4-year-old kindergartners. And I love this. There's no bad weather, only bad clothing. And it's so true, because we can think of weather as a barrier, and of course it can be. I live in Michigan currently, where it snows literally 6 months of the year. It snowed in May this year. So I get it. But we also can use that as an easy excuse to say we're not going outside. I remember one of my first directors here in Michigan telling me, I was complaining because I didn't want to go outside and I was going to be cold. And she said, "Do you have snow pants here?" And I said, "No." She said, "Go buy yourself some snow pants, leave them at the school, and wear them, and you're going to be warm and you're going to have fun." And I did, and it was enjoyable. So a lot of times we need to shift our thinking. Yes, is it a lot to get the children outside, 22 children in all of that gear? Yes, it takes time, but I'm telling you, it's so worth it, because their nap times are going to go a lot smoother and you're going to be a lot more happy during that time. So large scale, let's think about like full on devising a plan for outdoor classroom. The first thing that you're going to want to do is start with some reflective questions. What is my why behind creating outdoor experiences for children? And what are my dreams for offering outdoor experiences for children in my care? So you want to identify a vision. What is your vision going to be? And if you're working with others, you want to make sure that that's a unified vision, that you're working together, just like you would have a mission statement or a vision statement for an early childhood program. You would do the same thing, or any organization, for what you want that goal to be of creating your outdoor space. devising a strategic action plan. The first thing that many of you may be thinking of is, okay, well, the playground is like a shared space. It's like there's 6 classrooms that share it, maybe, or whatever it may be. So it is important to communicate. It wouldn't be right just to go out and start changing the environment without having conversations. Um, Going to your director, going to the administration first, communicating your idea. I did this when I created for my thesis an outdoor classroom. And I went to my director and I told her my plan. And she said, present your idea at the next staff meeting. And that's what I did. And I gave the others opportunities to, work with me and to work together. And honestly, many of them were just so happy that I was choosing to do that with my extra time that they were like, sure, go ahead. That sounds wonderful. But just making sure that we're always in communication. Also with the families as well, making sure that we're communicating in a newsletter or whatever it may be, so they know that what the plan is. Be informed. Going to other programs, forest-based schools, nature-based programs, place-based education programs, just get inspired. That's going to help motivate you and push you and come up with some really creative ideas. Then you're also going to want to set short-term and long-term goals. I'm sure many of you used the SMART strategy before. This is a link to creating SMART goals for teachers. But if your long-term goal is developing an outdoor classroom, I would give yourself honestly at least like a year to really have it established. It might happen shorter than that, but that would be your long-term goal. And then you're going to set small goals that would be short-term to get there. Including the children's voices. I think this is so wonderful. This is a picture from the book, The Great Outdoors by Mary Rifkin, which I would highly recommend as well. This actually gives some really tangible ideas for how to create a outdoor classroom and like what space ideas and different things like that. Like on the left, different activities that promote different developmental domains. But this image is of a child's blueprint of what they wanted to have on the outdoor classroom. So, you're going to be developing a blueprint. That's another thing of aspect of the strategic action plan. You definitely want to have a visual of what you think it's going to look like, what you want it to look like. And I love that this, children were invited to think about it. That's their playground too. That's their space. Give them some opportunity. They may come up with an idea that you never thought of. They probably will. And then, so you can do the outdoor space, honestly, as creatively as you want. It could look exactly like an indoor space with a lot of the same materials and same spaces that you would do indoors. So those are a lot of the spaces that I've outlined on the left. This image is actually from an elementary school that when they opened back up from remote learning after the pandemic, they created the space to be able to meet outside to, reduce the spread. So this article was written in light of that, and they give some great tips, 6 key ingredients to creating an outdoor classroom. I would definitely advise looking at that. Now, this space here, the visual, is more of a space that you would see maybe in an elementary school, maybe not as much as in the early childhood program, but it's still something that it can give you ideas. So I want you to think also about, what are some other spaces that you would want to develop? Taking into consideration the children that you serve, like we talked about, the ability levels of the children in your space, all of those things should be taken in consideration. So let's talk about simple implementations, right? So we know that maybe not all of us will be able to start creating an outdoor classroom space. It's just not tangible for the space in the where you work. So we can start with, now these are just ideas. I just wanted you to walk away from this presentation thinking about something that maybe you could go back to the classroom with, but it's not necessarily, there's other obviously ideas on top of these things, but these are some ideas for outside in the, in your space. Maybe you can't develop a whole classroom, but these are some things you could do. Starting the day outside. I don't know if any of you have done this before, but drop-offs outside Giving children some space to get those wiggles out, to freely play is just such a benefit. I've done this in multiple classrooms that I've worked in. I try to do that now with my own children homeschooling, and it really just sets out the tone of the morning. And also, if you have bodily kinesthetic learners, they need to get their energy out, they need to get their movement out. Small groups, taking small groups outside. I talked a little bit about this, but I don't know about you, but I'm an advocate for small groups. Breaking up the group, if you have a really big class and you have a lot of learners that learn actively, having one educator go outside and do their group can really help create a calm atmosphere for the whole program. Community walks, one of the classrooms that I worked in, there was a little market. It was an urban setting, so there wasn't a lot of, per se nature trails and that type of thing. There wasn't rivers or anything like that nearby, but we would take them and go to this little market and get to know people in our community. Gardening. I also did a collaboration I was a pre-K teacher. I did a collaboration with a toddler teacher for a whole year or 2 years. I think we worked together every week. We would get the children together. We were mixed age groups. We had some siblings in the class, so they got to spend time together, and we would just go garden. And it was such a beautiful experience to be able to do that together. Nature journals. These are some pictures of nature journals that I have that I love. If you're looking for one, you can also make your own. Box of books. I love reading outside. I think it's such a great way to be able to spend time. And if you're wanting to fulfill those, requirements, go outside, invite children to find a cozy nook, find a cozy space and read. Craft paper, taking a big, huge piece of craft paper, inviting children to find things out on the playground and bringing it over, having magnifying glasses or other scientific tools. And I also like to have like a marker or a Sharpie and writing down. So you're integrating some literacy there of like what they found. Maybe they found a ladybug. You're going to write ladybug. Yoga and meditation, right? We can do that inside the classroom, but it's also so beautiful to do outside. One of the classrooms that I worked in, we had yoga mats outside, and we had the yoga pretzel cards. My daddy is a pretzel, I believe it's called, and they would take turns leading each other. Mud kitchens are wonderful. These are some images of the mud kitchens that my husband created. Now, it doesn't have to be this elaborate. It could be just honestly buckets and something that, different like teapots and little cups and spoons. But just having the openness of being able to do that, and also a garden. Now, I know that some of you may think, oh, you must be such a green thumb. I'm not really good at it. I don't get things to grow, but I still have a love for anything in the garden. And so even this morning, my baby was very fussy, and I was trying to do everything inside, and I thought, nope, we're going outside. And I gave him a bucket and a little shovel, and he just had so much fun. So, infant toddler teachers, this is for you too. We want to start as young as possible, giving children experiences outdoors. So ideas for simple implementation inside. If you're not able to go outside, or you're thinking of how can I do this inside, opening up windows if you have any windows, or the door, and if they show, if they're outside, if they can see outside anywhere, inviting children to watch and record what they see. Give them a clipboard, give them the opportunity to do that. Still life drawings. This image over here of my daughter and my son looking at lavender. I love still life drawings. I think it's so wonderful. It helps them pay attention to detail. There's so many benefits of it. Also, blocks and natural materials. Here, my son is a lover of fish and fishing, so I had some books from the library, and I put some plants with it, and so we had some little fish and some people, and just seeing what they would do with it. Science center, there should always be scientific tools available. I love to have these 2 bins available by the door so that they can be taken outside, but they can also be inside as well. So if you are familiar with the Reggio Emilia philosophy, one of the things that the philosophy talks about is making learning inviting. We want to make provocations that provoke their interest, just as this would, right? So I went outside and I gathered different colored leaves. This did not take long at all. I did it on the spot, but I put them out in color coded order, and put some paint with it and offered it to my toddler. And it was such a wonderful experience for him. Those are type of things that we can do as intentional educators to bring nature inside if we don't have access outside. So I want to share some resources, and then we're going to end with a reflective question. Um, I talked a little bit about Last Child in the Woods, but Richard Louv, I have his website on the next page, but definitely write his name down if you're not already familiar with him. The Children in Nature Network, again, is a wonderful resource that has so many great things that we can do, and we can advocate for access and equitable access for all children. This is an old book from Bev Boss, Tumbling Over the Edge, but it's just a wonderful way to see children visually and see the creativity that happens during outdoor play. The Great Outdoors is another resource here from Mary Rivkin that is definitely like one of the fundamental resources I would say to go to. There's also from this is the revised version, I believe, sorry, of this book. And then Transforming Your Outdoor Early Learning Environment. This is a new read. So many visuals, so many wonderful ideas. I think for us as educators, we just want to have, be inspired. And so looking through other people's images and other programs can really help us do that. Also, there's so many nature-based children's books. This one is my favorite that I have to highlight, that I use all the time with my children. And it's a great way to integrate those learning outcomes, those things, those alphabet that you're trying to, help the child with, and being able to do that. And then here's just a list of resources if you want to take a photo, or, I think this will be shared eventually, but or a screenshot. I talked about the grants. There's grants for each state you can go to, but also there's from the federal government as well. So I just want to end with a reflective question. What is one element you can do today to make the next step toward integrating outdoor experiences at your program tomorrow? So that is my presentation. If you have any questions, this is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me.